Good afternoon, and welcome to our final thematic session. And it's my great pleasure to moderate this important discussion. And allow me to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. Today's discussion comes at a critical moment. Africa, as you know, is a home to some of the world's fastest growing economies, vast renewable energy potential, significant agricultural resource, and useful population eager to drive innovation and growth. At the same time, our continent faces climate-related challenges that require new form of investment, technology transfer, regional cooperation, and policy innovation. The UAE and Africa are increasingly building partnerships that connect capital with opportunity, innovation with development, and sustainability with economic transformation. Our conversation today will explore how these partnerships can contribute to food security, energy access, climate resilience, and inclusive growth. Please allow me, before inviting our speakers, to briefly highlight Ethiopia's experience. Ethiopia has placed green development at the center of its national transformation agenda through the climate resilient green economy strategy and successive development plans. The country has pursued a model that seeks to achieve economic growth while minimizing carbon emission. In agriculture, Ethiopia has invested heavily in irrigation expansion, climate smart agriculture, watershed rehabilitation, and food system resilience. Large-scale national initiatives on land restoration and environmental rehabilitation have demonstrated how environmental sustainability can be integrated into development planning. Now, in this spirit, that we look forward to learning from our distinguished panelists. So, to begin our discussion, it's my honor to invite, actually my very first speaker is not here, so let's proceed with Alex. Yes, we can proceed with yes. Yes, let me give some introductions about Alex. Okay. Alex, Head of Climate and Natural Resource Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, whose work focuses on climate change, extractive industries, energy transition, and the blue economy. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the hosts. I know many in the room. I've been part of some past dialogues around UAE, Africa specifically, also Gulf Africa, and it's wonderful to be able to take this conversation forward today. So I think the first thing where we really need to start is acknowledge that there is already a strong foundation of energy cooperation between the UAE and Africa. Over $70 billion invested between 2019 and 2023. We've got 60 projects under the Africa Green Investment Initiatives. Mazda are obviously very active on the continent. So there's a really strong foundation of energy cooperation in clean energy. And I think the potential is well recognized. What the challenge we have in front of us now is thinking about scale, reviewing our priorities, and I think finding those additional synergies that are going to be able to help us take things forward. And let's also recognize that we're in a particular moment right now where energy security, even you often hear reference to energy sovereignty, is the big word, is the big term of the moment. Energy security comes first. Now, that's perfectly understandable in the context of Strait of Hormuz, in the context of Ukraine, the geopolitical tensions that we're experiencing. Those of us, once you look closely, you realize very quickly that the idea of energy sovereignty or having an energy system that is has no dependencies or interconnections with the international system or other countries. It's not really a practical reality, but it is an impulse with real world implications. And this is more than just having the world's largest oil producer with a policy of drill, baby, drill. There's much larger forces at play And I think we're seeing this impact the world of climate diplomacy. It's certainly impacting the world of energy policy. Now, around the time of the conflict around the Strait of Hormuz, you did see a kind of simplified narrative sometimes that, if the world had invested more in renewable energy, we wouldn't have these strategic vulnerabilities. That's as true as far as it goes, but I think we should also recognize that it's not as simple as saying no one owns the sun, no one owns the wind. We understand that when it comes to renewable technologies, those value chains are very concentrated in one country. It's concentrated in China. That's not to make China the new bogeyman of the energy system. It's just to recognize a reality that we have in front of us. So shifting towards renewables does not take away the problem of strategic dependencies and systemic risk in our energy systems. That transition needs to happen. The move needs to happen. And why am I saying this? Why am I talking about US and China and so forth in the context of UAE Africa? I think it sets an agenda for us. There is a clear need to expand energy access on the continent. We've already heard it said in earlier panels today that economic development, energy security, energy access for the many millions of Africans who don't have access to electricity, those are priorities. Any discussion, engagement, partnership around energy has to put development front and center. I think that's well established. The question now is about achieving scale, and I think perhaps maybe a bit presumptuous, but let's frame it as moving from projects to systems. Something that we've seen in South Africa is that when the regulatory system is adjusted, private capital flows in. We've had a very successful renewable independent power producers program, but what is less known is that the amount of private sector investment by firms and household in renewable energy infrastructure outside of the renewable energy independent power producers program actually is multiples of what has been done through that program. So when the conditions are right, finance flows, finance follows. But one of the challenges has been in transmission infrastructure, and I think this is true for the continent as a whole. We desperately need investment in transmission infrastructure. We have our various regional power pools. Many countries still remain to be connected. The capacity of the interconnectors in those power pools is a challenge. And again, this is key to implementing a more regional approach to energy cooperation. Instead of looking country to country, a lot of these investments are still concentrated in just a handful of countries. We need to look around the power system as a whole. We need to look at some of the risk and structuring of deals that is going to allow that private capital to flow in, and overall a more systemic approach. I think we have a unique opportunity where in Ethiopia we've got COP32 less than 2 years away. There's a need to start thinking in very concrete terms right now what can be done to build concrete partnerships that can be platformed, that can be profiled at COP32 when we're talking about months away. So I think we need to get the right partners in the room and start talking very concretely. The basic frameworks are in place. We've got AUDA, NEPAD, we've got the African Energy Commission, We've got the Infrastructure and Energy Department at the African Union Commission. These regional players are well positioned. The continental frameworks are in place. And I think now, again, going from that kind of projects to systems perspectives in terms of UAE Africa collaboration and energy systems is where we need to be moving for. I would also just put a plug in to say that although the kind of natural, I guess, fit is around energy cooperation and renewable energy, there's a lot that can be done there. Let's not overlook other aspects of the climate debate. Adaptation is a huge priority for the continent. Agro-industrial developments and linked to that, climate-resilient agriculture is a huge priority for the continent. So as much as the momentum is in the energy space, let's make sure that those other areas stay on the agenda and that we explore where the partnership can go on those topics.
Thank you, Alex. Your remarks highlighted the importance of a systemic and regional governance framework and strategic resource management to ensure sustainability and meet the objectives of development outcomes. And our next speaker will bring a valuable South-South cooperation perspective, helping us understand how emerging participation or partnerships can unlock new opportunities for investment. And it's my pleasure to invite Professor João Pascoal Monte, founder and president of the Brazil Africa Institute and the leading advocate for Brazil-Africa cooperation. Professor Monte, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I want to congratulate the organizers of this great event. When I see a room like this, brings me the idea that we are together and together we can go further. What we're talking about, partnership and engagement and cooperation, sometimes looks like it's very easy to give the recipe, which is not easy at all. I've been traveling within Africa since 2016, so a long time. I've been traveling to many countries. Out of 54, I visited already 47. Ethiopia is one of the places that I've been visiting a lot. And I participated in some events like this one. And I always hear the word potential. What's the potential of the engagement? And potential, it's good, but doesn't pay the bills and doesn't put food in our stomachs, right? So it's very important for us to transform the potential that we have in front of us in something tangible. In this panel, we are discussing two important issues, agriculture and energy. I come from a country where energy is not a problem, neither agriculture issues or food security. When I speak with government agents in some African countries, we start to see what is the possibility of bringing energy. You mentioned, Alex, energy security, which is very important. And I know that many of you had some issues about electricity, right? Lack of power. Without electricity, it's not easy to bring the investment, even the attention and the interest from the private sector. So it's very crucial to establish a systemic protocol to bring for individual countries and also in a collectivity scenario for the continent. But it's important to see which country would be possible to have a agenda of power. Because without power, it's almost impossible to bring the attention of investors. Also agriculture. Is it possible to produce in some African countries the food that the country needs, but also is it possible to produce for other countries? The answer is yes. If you allowed me to bring some cases from Brazil. Brazil, 40 years ago, used to be an importer of food, of crops. And now Brazil is one of the biggest producers in the world. So you mentioned, moderator, South-South cooperation, and I think we should emphasize the importance of South-South cooperation in some countries that already developed some systems of production of food should be invited to come to Africa, so to some African countries. But besides South-South cooperation, I understand triangular cooperation is crucial. And now UAE plays a very important role in these connections. When the UAE invests in the power sector, in the agriculture sector, for me, it's very much important not only to invest in the sector, but to open the mind of companies, private sector, to engage. I mean local companies, but also international companies. If we have, for example, Ethiopia, what is the possibility of production of food in Ethiopia? Massive. Because of the land, because of the water, because of the power, you can do it. But if we just give land, if you just produce crops, we are not able to invite companies to come to this big, let's say, opportunity. But also, it's very important to not only produce food, but to see the whole system and add value. Again, if we only produce soybean or maize, we should understand that this could be amplified to other possibilities of interaction and to send out of the country the raw material but adding value. I want to also come to another point, which is how can we change the situation without empowering people? So if we give the opportunity to the young generation, I think would be very much, I think there will be a great opportunity for the country itself, but also for the people. And I want to emphasize a program that the UAE government is establishing, is working with us, with the Brazil Africa Institute, which is capacity building. We are training now young Africans in these two important themes, energy transition and also agriculture. So the kids, they go to Brazil, they stay there for a period of time, and when they come back, they are more able to deploy the knowledge in the country, in the place where they are. And this is an opportunity to transform the mind, but also they are catalyzers. When we will see the results, won't be next day, but will be in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. And this is a change of paradigm. I think what we have now is a opportunity for us to think ourselves and to transform the moment that we have and change the world potential in something concrete. Ideas are very important, and we discuss when we come to event like this. But what I think which is very fundamental is to be able to transform the ideas into actions. I would like to see, this is for the organizers of the event, maybe next time we should have more private sector in the room for them to see how we can go beyond the talk, beyond the conversation. Yes, we need to talk, but we should be able to act, to have actions. I stop now for a while.
Top. Thank you. I would love to thank Professor Monte. As he mentioned, the insights are are results of almost 6-decade cooperation and knowledge to this very continent, and especially Ethiopia. And we really value your insights. And as you have mentioned, on emphasizing the South-South cooperation, it is also important to emphasize and give priorities for financial cooperations. Financial cooperations will lead us to our next speaker. And our next speaker is Ms. Maitha Al-Kaabi, a distinguished expert in climate finance and international cooperation, who has played a leading role in climate finance negotiations and in establishing major climate investment initiatives. And hopefully she will give us insights on climate financings and financial cooperations, as Professor Monte said. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much. First of all, allow me to join my colleagues to thank the organizers. Started with the Emirates Center of Strategic Studies and Research, and Anwar Gargash Academy, and the Foreign Affairs Institute for inviting us to this dialogue. Really appreciate it. Very interesting to hear the reflection from my colleagues at the stage. When it comes to the finance, regardless whether climate finance or finance you needed for a certain project, renewable energy and agriculture. Before we go to the finance, let's agree on one thing. We cannot deal with the agriculture or the project to develop agriculture and the renewable energy as separated project. We need to think, because both of them, they are interconnected, deeply interconnected. And I think we agree on this matter. If we invest on them equally, you hit many things at the same time. Energy access, energy security, food access, and etc., food security. But when it comes to the finance and bringing the money, there are always challenges or risk why the money doesn't fly to certain region where others fly more. And during my work as a team lead of a climate finance at the COP28, there was always a call from developing countries that we cannot access finance. Now, when I had a conversation with one of multilateral fund, I understood that the challenge is not the money. The challenge is the projects are not ready to finance. I'll give you an example. Some regions, they have the idea, they have the resources, but the projects are not well prepared. There is no technical assessment. There is no environmental assessment. There is no feasibility studies. So all of that need to be done before we finance the project and build it and develop that project. So countries are struggling on that stage. Some of developing countries are struggling to access finance because they don't have neither financial expertise or technical expertise to help them to develop the project or to make the idea ready to be bankable. So, and then let's talk about the risk, because the risk, if we understand it, whether that risk for the projects related to climate change, mitigation climate change, or agriculture, renewable energy, you have to think about what risk and how we can address them. And that will help you to understand how the system works. So number one, the project bankability. And as I mentioned, the challenge of developing country, how we can address that. We need to start financing the preparation for those projects, creating strong preparation facilities, bringing expert and technical expert to help the community. So we need to engage with the community who need the most. That's first of all. Second of all, when you talk about the currency risk, most of the countries, most of the projects, when we talked about, finance that project is dominated by US dollar. Revenue of that project, local currency. So that difference in the transaction scared the investor, doesn't feel them that comfort. UAE recently signed with Ethiopia the 3 billion between Ethiopia for that currency swap to reduce that risk. So both Ethiopia and UAE can enjoy having stable economy and using their local currency. And thus it comes to the third risk, regulatory. Some investors, they don't go to invest on the place because the lack of the role of the government. What does it mean? There is no long-term certainty. There is no long-term vision. That related also to the political risk. So when it's not uncertain, there is kind of not comfortable environment to invest on it. Changing on the priorities of the countries. We heard that during COP. When countries change their priorities, that means let's start the circle again. Let's start with the new projects. A fourth one is a limited use of the capital. What does it mean? We do have capital. It's not about the capital, but how we can use that, whatever we have, to bring the private sectors. So nobody talk about the pension. Nobody talk about domestic finance. So you need some kind of, probably you can use this public finance to make the project bankable. And that will help the investors to come to your place. So you need policy, you need regulatory, and you need actions on the ground. And finally, you need to talk about preserve risk. What does it mean? Many times when you say, okay, go invest in that country, oh no, there was a company who has experience, they lost money, or etc., etc. We need to show a successful partnership. We need to show a successful stories. These, if we tap on them, we basically help to scale up the finance that my colleague speak about it, scale up the projects and provide the comfort for the investors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smitha. As you mentioned, we have fundamental preconditions for a successful climate financing, among which climate financing has to follow strict due diligence and follow-up, because it is not the finance that brings the objective or the aimed change. It is rather the management and mutual commitment of both the financer and the host country that brings the change. By now, I can give the audience chance to ask questions.
Can I add one point?
Of course, of course.
So we always talk about partnership. We always talk about countries and the investors. So the one who bring the money. But we don't talk about the role of the MDBs. And one of the things we've been calling during COP, in our presidency, we need, the MDBs need to be more bolder. They need to be more bigger. That's why we'll be calling for reforming MDBs. Because their role is not just lending money. Their role is to help to crowd the private sector or private finance. Just to add to this, that's nothing to do with the region, with the country itself, but could be at the global scale. Thank you.
Thank you. I would love to add some points for Mr. Alex. You can answer by adding this. On your speech, already you have mentioned that a systemic and regional governance for resources. Well, as you have been mentioning, can we have some best experiences and lessons for African countries and of course for countries in the Gulf regarding, as you said, systemic and regional governance of resources and energy sources, as you said?
Yeah, I certainly think those examples do exist, and part of what our organization does as a think tank and think tanks here represented in the room is to bring those lessons forward. I mean, the one thing I'm picking, there's a strong commonality, I think, or themes emerging here, and one of the things you'll hear over and over again, you heard it this afternoon, is that it's not necessarily the money itself that's the problem. I was thinking about this analogy of the sailors stuck on the ocean, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. There is money in the system. The problem is that it's not usable and it's not flowing to where it's needed. And so when I think about the systemic interventions, it's a bit like thinking about building desalination infrastructure. When it comes to bringing in the funds from the money from the private sector, when it comes to those kind of strategic interventions on project development facilities, intervening in that risk equation in a very systemic way. We saw this as a strong theme in the South African G20 last year. A lot of engagement around the risk premium in Africa. Where does that really come from? No one is saying that there's no investment risk in Africa. But sometimes when you dig into this, you find that some of it has to do with availability of data. Some of it has to do with knowledge and awareness of projects that are actually working and understanding of the returns that are being made. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done on de-risking, crowding in finance. The development banks certainly have a role in this area. We have a continental power systems master plan. We've got regional institutions that have a mandate to facilitate the implementation of that plan. And I really think there's potential for ECSSR, AGDA, IFA, the hosts of this gathering, to sit down with some of these regional institutions, IFA in the context of COP32, and come up with a structured plan around how this kind of shift towards systemic interventions, greater investments in transmission infrastructure, and also thinking about anchor demand, right? Because we all are familiar with the figure of 600 million Africans without access to electricity. There's huge need on the continent. Access to electricity is a major brake on the continent's industrialization ambitions. It's a brake on the continent's ambitions to process its minerals. But need is not sufficient. When it comes to making an investment feasible, it's about offtake. It's about who is paying for that energy that's being produced. And so this idea of investments built around anchor demand and structuring that, whether that is through industrial parks, through minerals processing, through agro-industry, through data centers even. Building that anchor demand that's going to make those projects feasible, bringing in the project preparation facility, the support, the technical support, but then also looking at the social and broader economic impacts, because what we also don't want to see is investments in a huge minerals processing facility or a cordoned off industrial park where communities, small business owners, informal economy actors just adjacent to these developments are sitting without power. So I think that's going to be another big challenge for us. Yes, some of this is going to be about operating at scale. It is going to be around focusing on industry, minerals processing, where you're going to have this large energy demand, but it has to be linked with the rest of the economy. Otherwise, you're going to run into really problematic issues around equity, access, and inclusive development.
Okay, thank you. By this we can... Okay, you have a question? Let me give a chance for Professor Monte then. I just wanted you to highlight on the points you raised earlier, especially focusing on human capital developments. As Mr. Alex mentioned, we have socio-economic factors affecting the success of a project. Also, by another way, they are being affected by process and elements of a project. So among these factors, I think it's human capital. So what shall we do to enhance and advance the scarcities we are experiencing on human capital development in Africa and, of course, in other southern countries in southern hemisphere.
Capacity building, I think it's crucial. We need to stop considering that we can go to the moon when you have to go to the ground, right? If we do not have people around us that are able to operate the machine, the equipment, how can we go beyond this, right? It is a very simple equation. If we do not transform the scenario that we have, we want sometimes to go to a very sophisticated decision, but sometimes we need to go to a simple implementation, which is bringing to the society, to the place where we are, in a very remote area, possibility of empowering people. And I insist, we should start with the young generation, young people. We have a big continent, right, with a big margin of young people from 18 to 39 years old. In some countries have almost 70% of population. If you not educate these people, sometimes we lose the opportunity to grow and to develop the country and the region. We have so many doctors in the room, we have so many PhDs, we have so many experts. This is very important. But if we do not use the knowledge that we have to bring to the people on the ground, the possibility for them to work, to be able to be more equipped, we cannot transform the reality of the community. And if you go to very remote areas, we see that the needs are immense. The demands are very big. So we need to use the capacity. And this should start with the government policy, right? But also, again, we can invite the civil society and the private sector to be part of the decision, the process. Because if we just put the obligation to the government today is not the government of tomorrow. We have politicians in the room, we know that, right? But if we bring together others, the result can be a process that we work together. So capacity building, for me, it's crucial, and we should emphasize that without empowering people, we cannot transform the reality. And I want also to emphasize that we should consider industrialization, right? How can we go beyond the need without having industries? And there is another issue that I want to raise. We are thinking about transforming the reality in Africa. But what about inviting the diaspora, which has opportunities outside Africa, to come back to Africa and deploy within the continent the answers that they already implemented outside the continent?
Thank you. Now the floor is open for participants to ask questions.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you to the last panelist. My question is a rhetoric question, and it will seem to be a bit funny. I just want to ask, why is UAE interested in Africa now? It's a question that might seem to be simple. At first, Africa had traditional partners, and UAE in the past was not very, very much interested. And I'm asking this because, as a lecturer at the university, I'm thinking, I teach economic development, and I'm thinking to add a chapter that will be focusing on UAE and African relationship as a means of bringing development. So when I ask this question, I'm asking because I buy the vision. If somebody could ask, why the interest today? That is my question. Thank you. And I want that the answer should be frank. This question may go to the organization team, those who organize the event, Dr. Epster, Sam, I don't know, with your team. If you could just help me with this, it would permit me to do many things when I go back to my country, especially in teaching the young PhD and master student. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. As a modality, if we can, summarize our questions in less than 30 seconds is better, because we are running out of time. Okay.
Thank you very much. I am Zengis Makaloi from the Institute for Security Studies. I think my question is, when we talk about sustainability, I think the previous panel talked about Lobito Corridor. When you look at the case of Zambia, you have incidences, and I think it's very polarized when we talk about sustainability and the effects of mineral investments in certain countries. The Anglo-American debacle over zinc-lead poisoning in Kabwe, I think the gentleman from Saya might be able to speak about that, given that he's in South Africa. And then there's also the spillage, the tailings dam spillage last year from the Chinese-owned corporation. So how do we, when we look at the investment in Lobito, about $6 billion in terms of investment and $4 billion from the United States, what guarantees are they in place, both from the host countries, communities, as well as the investors, the consortium of investors, to safeguard the actual people in the supply chain of this corridor, to avoid further incidences like that? Because it's clearly not an east-west thing. It's clearly an issue of can they actually invest sustainably for generations? So yeah, that's the gist of my question. Maybe lessons learned from the UAE with regards to that as well, and where they see themselves in terms of investing in Africa in a more sustainable way to avoid those things from previous investors. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yes, give it. Just.
I think the question goes to the UAE person on the panel. We spoke about partnerships. I would like to pick your brains on that one. What will be the tentative steps to do the partnership to come to fruition? I know it's going to be bilateral, but what will be the tentative steps? Thank you.
Thank you. So now let's bring back the chance to the panelists. Let's start with Ms.
So let me understand your question. It's like you're talking about what kind of partnership with the region. You are talking about the whole continent or with specific country?
Why not?
Bilateral, it's like, it means for me it's specific country. But if you talk about the whole region, the whole continent is different. So I'll tell you a great example of what kind of partnership and why we are, as a UAE, we think ahead, more advanced. COP28 was hosted in November, at the end of November 2023, ahead of COP28. We, UAE, established an initiative called Africa Green Investment Initiative, basically to mobilize 4.5 billion all the way to help and support Africa as a continent into the energy transition and a green industrialization. Not only that, you know, one of the challenge we keep talking when the risk I mentioned, when we talk about finance, is the risk sharing. Who's going to share the risk? Who's going to invest? So what UAE did, innovative way, is we create a vehicle. That vehicle, and that's why I refer to the public finance to utilize it. It's not about we don't have capital. It's like how to use the capital to scale up the finance needed to create or to achieve and implement the agenda. So UAE, what they did, they create that as an outcome of COP28, a vehicle called Altera. And that Altera, it has two instruments. One instrument is to reduce the risk. So there was a capital from public finance, 30 billion. And the notion and the idea is to scale up and attract private investment or private sector. And why we did that, the goal is 250 billion by 2030. There was always conversation with World Bank, with MDBs, with the private sector, with, as you know and I know, who's going to share the risk? What is the policy there? If the capital is there, but there is also, we have to be more practical. And think about it as a region. If you are an investor and you want to invest in a country, the first thing you want to ask yourself, it's bankable, it's profitable. How about it when it comes to energy? What about the tariff? Do they have a predictable tariff structure? Do we have investment transparency framework, and et cetera, et cetera? So it's a bit, to be honest with you, it's a bit to say, okay, let's do the investments as a group. It's always the bilat when it comes, there is like a comfort for the investors. But when it comes to the vehicles and availability of finance, it's there. So one, we talk about the Altera when at that time, private sector, before COP28, they were having this issue. Why we don't go there? Because we want somebody to share the risk with us. And when we talk to the World Bank and say, or the MDBs, they say, okay, if we're gonna take the risk, then a private sector come and take the profit. So what the benefit for us? So it's always not one solution. No way will be one fit solution for everyone. It requires a work from top to bottom and bottom top. And that's why I provide, sir, the MDB's reform. It's not only what we need, it's a policy reform or regulatory reform and institutional reform within the region and within the country, but also you need to think at the global scale. And then you will see the finance flow to the country or to the community that they need it the most. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Misal and Alex.
Sure, I'll take a stab at both those questions. Not so much to answer the question of why now in terms of UAE Africa, because we must see that in its context. I mean, for us as a foreign policy institute, we are keeping an eye on all sorts of foreign economic center engagement with Africa. And yes, you've got your traditional partners, Europe, US, China has a long history and of course has grown and grown. But what you're seeing is really across the board, countries are realizing that if they want a strategic position in the dynamic, developing global economy, they have to forge partnerships with Africa. Africa has a young and growing population. It has a huge percentage of the world's undeveloped arable land, immense resources. So I think the questions we should be asking ourselves is not why is a particular country or particular region interested in Africa. We are in a moment of a new scramble in terms of partnerships and engagements. Critical minerals is a big part of that. The question is, what does Africa do in this moment? Because the reality is that the fact that there are so many global partners that are seeking to elevate their engagements with the continent does give us leverage. It gives us leverage to establish true win-win partnerships. But that's not a foregone conclusion. That doesn't happen automatically. And we've seen international partners, even to this day, establish deals with our local political elites that are not in the continent's interests. So there's a real need for some soul-searching and engagement around how we use this moment. But there is no doubt that there is this big new push for engagement on the continent. Then the question around minerals governance. Look, when it comes to this moment on critical minerals, and we had the African Green Minerals Strategy released last year, we've got this huge, everyone is talking about critical minerals, and everyone is talking about Africa's critical minerals. You see it at the mining in Davos for the last few years and various forums. The message has been increasingly clearly articulated that this idea of Africa as simply a source of minerals for the rest of the world is not acceptable. The status quo is not acceptable. Africa doesn't want to have these enclave economies, this kind of pit-to-port model where you're mining the minerals, going straight to the port, and then it's going for processing overseas. Now, that message has been very clearly articulated, and it's true that that is where the policy focus is at the moment. But if you look at the African mining vision, and if you speak to those engaged in this area, you know, the question of the link between mineral resources and industrialization is just half of the conversation. The other half of the conversation, and there is a risk that this gets overshadowed, is precisely the governance dimension. The questions around the impact of mining activities on communities, the question of how mineral rents are distributed within a society, environmental safeguards, strengthening environmental authorities. So I do think that there's a real need to protect and elevate and strengthen both the debate around governance and the actual institutions that are there to strengthen governance. And I think what we've got to be careful of is saying that you hear this sometimes, kind of how can we get, whether it's UAE or it's China or, you know, some other actor, the US, to act more responsibly when they invest in Africa. What we need is domestic governance systems that make sure that there's an equal playing field, and that playing field insists on responsible behavior, socially responsible behavior and environmentally responsible behavior. Mining does have negative impacts on the environment and on communities. But I think we're past the debate of discussing whether we want mining in Africa or not. There are immense opportunities associated with Africa's resource wealth, but we've got to ensure that we build the governance systems and the institutions to minimize, avoid, respond to those negative impacts. And that goes to conflicts in the Great Lakes region. It goes to water quality issues. It goes to impact on agricultural land. There's a whole range of dimensions. So certainly this is something that we've been very aware of, is that there's a real need to, while we recognize that this debate around industrialization and minerals processing and green value chains is essential and important, deserves attention, we can't, in that rush and in placing emphasis on that message, disregard the governance debate. Those two have to go together.
Okay, thank you. One last concluding remark from Professor Monte in a few minutes.
Yeah, I would like to just give a case that was a big failure from a Brazilian example. Alex, I think you heard about the Vale. Vale was a big company that had a very big project to bring coal from Teti, the northeast of Mozambique, but it did not work well because of the lack of arrangement with the government and also with the community. So mining is important, yes, but we should have a important discussion and tangible result according to what we put in the paper, in the document, right? But if you don't do this properly, the result will be very bad. That's what happened there. We had the opportunity to transform the country, but did not work well because of the commitment that not was established at the beginning of the process.
Okay, thank you. Due to interest of time, we are now forcefully, concluding this session. I would love to thank my panelists and participants. Really, thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you.